Hi guys, so I'm here today to do my mid-month wrap-up for the month of March. These are all the books I've read in the first half of the month, which add up to 7, which is more than I would usually read in half a month, that's for sure, and that's very much because of the Femme Fantail readathon, which was a readathon I ran with my friend Jill and was all about reading fantasy works written by women. So naturally, a chunk of these books are fantasy books written by women. There are a couple though that are not, so I thought I would start with those. And the first one is a non-fiction book, and that is Notorious RBG, Life and Times of Ruth Bader Ginsberg by Irene Carmen. So I listened to this one on audiobook on Scribd, and I started it almost immediately after seeing the film On the Basis of Sex, which is a recent film in the cinemas that follows one of Ruth Bader Ginsberg's first ever cases in court as a lawyer in her battle to sort of end the legal discrimination of the sexes and take down all the laws that kind of discriminate on the basis of sex. So I love this film. I think it was just a great watch, had great focus, great acting, you know, just well written, interesting look at some legal history, which is something I find very interesting. And obviously it's difficult not to slightly compare the book to this film, because it was because of the film that I read the book, because I wanted to know more. This film only really explores some of the early years of Ruth Bader Ginsberg's career, which has a long lifespan and is still going today. And I wanted to know more, so I saw that this audiobook was on Scribd, and it was a little bit disappointing. It wasn't a terrible book, and if I hadn't seen the film, it might have offered a little more interest to me, but what it added to the information that I had gleaned from the film felt very minor. The book itself is very short, so I maybe should have seen this coming, and too short I would say. It's about 5 hours on audiobook. I'm not sure how much that translates to in pages, but it felt insubstantial, I feel like is the word to use. I still think Ruth Bader Ginsberg is a fascinating woman. She trained to be a lawyer in the 1950s, she's now a member of the Supreme Court, and I know she's a bit of like a cult hero in the United States, although I didn't know as much about her coming from the UK. And yeah, I find legal history fascinating. Legal history is what I kind of specialise in my study of antiquity, but it's just something I find interesting to study regardless of the time period, and you know I'm interested in kind of like the history of feminism and equal rights, so in that respect it fulfilled those desires, but it just left me wanting more. Like, it didn't feel like it gave me enough. The audiobook, it felt quite surface level and tidbitty. Tidbitty, I don't know if that's an adjective, but I feel like it's the perfect way to describe it, because it was just like little random bits of information. That's what the book felt like, and they were interesting bits of information, but I felt like I could have just read them on a blog or on a Tumblr, which I'm pretty sure is where this book originates from. It didn't feel like a substantial non-fiction book. That might just be because of what I look for in a non-fiction book, but I was looking for something a little bit deeper, a little bit fuller, more in-depth, that kind of gave me a nice solid chronology of Ruth Bader Ginsberg's life from like here to there. So what I want essentially, I think, is like a biography, and this book was not that. It was just like random anecdotes, lots of them obviously pertaining to her experience in the legal world, but still, you know, just like little anecdotes that I could have read online. So this one didn't really work for me, and that's not to say you might not enjoy it. But the other book I read this month that wasn't fantasy written by a woman was fantasy, however, and that is The Fork, the Witch and the Worm by Christopher Paolini. So this is Christopher Paolini's first book set in his world of Allegasia for quite some years. He originally wrote The Inheritance Cycle, a 4-part high epic fantasy series. It's one of my all-time favourite series. And this book takes us back to Allegasia and is a collection of 3 stories with a kind of like surrounding kind of framing story, so kind of 4 stories in that sense, about characters that we came to know and love in the original series, as well as some new characters. The stories are set in various times before and after the events of the Inheritance Cycle, and it was so wonderful returning to Allegasia. Yeah, if you've seen any of my favourite books of all time videos, you will know how much I love the Eragon books. The first one is Eragon, so the Eragon books. They are one of my all-time favourite series, and I was so thrilled to hear that we were getting more from that world, and that this is very much just the beginning of more. There is more still to come, and I'm so excited because I got some little insights into Saphira and Eragon's lives, and Murtag's lives, and Angela's lives. But there are so many other characters I want to know more about, like Nasawada, so I'm really hoping that she will crop up in a future volume like this, because there are more to come. I also read this because I was chairing an interview with the author, Christopher Paolini, during his UK book tour this month, which was an absolute privilege and a joy to talk to him in person about this book and about the world of Allegasia as a whole. So I have lots of fond memories tied up with this book. I don't think you could really read this if you haven't read the original series, however, but if you haven't read the original series and you like fantasy and you like dragons, what are you waiting for? So the next few books I have are all fantasy written by women, some of which I started and finished during the Femme Fatale readathon, some of which I read entirely during the Femme Fatale readathon, and some of which I started during the readathon and then finished afterwards. You can watch my vlog of the readathon if you're interested more in how my reading progressed over the week. But the first book that comes to hand is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I borrowed this from my library, so sorry about the glare. I need to return this one. But I was pleasantly surprised by this book. This has to be one of the most hyped young adult fantasy series on BookTube. I have been hearing about this book series since I started BookTube, I'm pretty sure, or early on. When did it first come out? It first came out in 2012, the year I started BookTube. So yes, I have been hearing about it since the beginning. People love Laini Taylor's writing, and I had never read a book by her before, so I thought, hey, you know what, this is my opportunity, I'll give it a shot. And I, like I said, enjoyed this one way more than I was expecting to. It's about a teenage girl, 17-year-old I believe, called Karu, who has been raised by chimera, who are these sort of like demon creatures that are like composites of different animals. Some parts of them are human-like, some parts of them are animal-like, and she's been raised since a baby, not having any human parents that she knows of, by these chimera, and helping them in their work, which is to collect teeth. She doesn't know why they collect teeth, but she helps them do that whilst sort of living her own life in the human world. She attends art school in Prague, and yes, this is excellently written. That is definitely the selling point for this novel. What I mean by that is that it was so like immersive. One, I really want to go to Prague now. I mean, I always kind of wanted to go to Prague, but like I extra want to go to Prague now. Two, the world was so creative. So I've already told you that initial premise, but there's so much going on, and you're learning so much about the sort of interaction between the human world and the chimera world, and another sort of like group of beings that you come into contact with as the story unfolds. And it's so unique. Like, I've never read personally another fantasy novel with a world quite like this, and I thought it was so well developed, so unique, so creative, and just like perfect amount of mystery that I was constantly asking questions about this world, and it was so exciting following along and finding out about them. The only thing that really made this not a 5-star book for me is that there are definitely moments in this where I'm like, yeah, these characters are teenagers, and I don't mean that in a way that I want to insult anyone that's still a teenager. I mean, you know, take advantage of it. But when I was a teenager, I definitely thought things or said things or reacted in an emotional way that I don't necessarily act now as an adult. Lots of that is because a lot of the things that are happening are very new and first time, and you've not experienced as many things before. And I would have loved, and I certainly would have related to the character of Karu more as a teenager than I necessarily do as an adult, and because of that there was moments where I was just going eye roll. I think these are just things that are a little bit like YA tropes that come up time and time again. I have read this before, I have grown out of this, did you really just say that? And those things were definitely a little bit eye-rolly for me, but they were minor in comparison to the fascinating world and the interesting characters, and I think I will definitely continue on with this series. Another young adult fantasy novel that I read though was The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Aze, and this is the first in a duology, the second of which I've already ordered because I loved this one so much, and I'm super excited to read the second one. This one is sort of like a blend of fairy tales. It is most heavily inspired by 1001 Arabian Nights, But there's sort of elements of Beauty and the Beast and Bluebeard in there. That might just be because those fairy tales all have a lot in common to begin with, but it felt like the author was like sort of bringing all of these together, or at least recognising the similarities in these fairy tales and folklore and sort of stringing them together in this story. And I really enjoyed that. The premise is that we are in a world where this prince takes a new bride every night, and then every morning that woman that was his wife is executed, and this has been going on for like days and days and days and days, like I think we're into like the 70s or something, and every day there's a new bride. And our main character Shazzy has lost her best friend to these circumstances. She was chosen as one of the brides, so she decides to volunteer, which is unusual. No one's volunteered to be a bride as of yet, in order to hopefully find out what's going on and seek out revenge on behalf of her friend. However, there's obviously more going on than first meets the eye. It's not as simple as a cruel prince has a thing for killing his brides. There's indications that there's some sort of curse from the very beginning of this book, but we don't know what that is, and we, along with Shazzy, are sort of finding out more of the background and what's really going on, whilst things start to stir up in the populace out of anger at what is going on with the sort of like sacrificing of all their daughters. And Shazzy has to struggle, and Shazzy has to deal with her feelings that she brought into this situation with the ones that she's now starting to feel towards the prince, and it's super good, and I'm so excited to find out what happens next. The next book I have beat up beyond belief, but it was very good, so maybe that's just because maybe I just beat up the books I love more. This is Fires of the Faithful by Naomi Kritzer. I was drawn to this fantasy book initially because it is queer, and there is a like queer protagonist in that there is a female protagonist in it that is attracted to other women. And I am all for that. I am always on the hunt for more of that in fantasy literature, so I'm always pleased to find new books like that, and I'm so glad that this one was actually, again, better than I expected it to be, so I can recommend it to more people. I really enjoyed this. It was not at all what I was expecting. I was honestly expecting a kind of fantasy romance book, and it's not. So if you're looking for fantasy books with queer female characters, but aren't as interested in fantasy books where the focus is more on a romance plotline, and you're more interested in the kind of like political landscape and the kind of adventure side of fantasy, this is such a great read, because it's almost like a side plot that she is gay, and I like both of those things. Like, I'm up for the romance, I'm up for the adventure, so I really enjoyed this. Although it's another duology, and I am hoping we get a little bit more of the romance in the second book, but I'm still equally as excited to find out more about what's going to happen to this world, and no spoilers, but basically our protagonist in this book is a teenage girl at a music conservatory in this magical world, and a new girl has just come and has been set as her roommate. She's not had a roommate for a while now, and with this new girl comes a new song, and they don't know where this song has come from, and there's a mystery of where this song has come from, where this girl has come from, because it seems like she's telling fibs, and also their relationship with the forbidden music that they're not supposed to play or sing, and this music is of the old way religion. Because this is a world very much divided between two religions, and about like religious oppression, and how the new religion of the Lord and the Lady has sort of forbidden people from practicing this old religion, which these songs are from. And our protagonist feels no real affinity to either. She's fascinated by the music of the old religion, and she's been raised in the way of the new religion, but she's a character that I love because she's a questioning character. She identifies with certain aspects of these two different religions, and she's very much opposed to the oppression going on in this world, and the terrible things that she learns are going on and the oppression of its people as the novel unfurls. But she doesn't, just like latch on to anything willy-nilly or take anything for granted. She's very much she has so many questions, and she's just trying to see where she fits and what she believes throughout the novel, and I'm really excited to see kind of where she lands in the second book, and how her opinions develop, and how the tensions between all these different factions in this world unravel. So this book, like I said, initially set in a music conservatory, but the plot has so much more to it than I was expecting. There is so much tension, we're constantly changing backdrop to our protagonist's life, and it's so interesting to follow along, and things, yeah, don't really go as you might expect them to. But then two more audiobooks I listened to on script. The first is Entreat Me by Grace Draven. Now this is a fantasy book that is heavy on the romance. This is a romance novel in a fantasy world, so be warned if that's not your cup of tea, but I loved it. I love Grace Draven. I have recently become a massive fan. I've read 4 of her books now, and this is one of my favourite. It is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it takes all my favourite things about that fairy tale and really like builds on them and ditches some of the things I don't like as much. Like, I'm not as interested in the storyline of sisters that hate each other and some mean sisters force this younger sister to go and take this place at the Beast's house, which is quite common in Beauty and the Beast retellings. And what I like about this story is that the two sisters at the centre of it both go to the Beast's house, and they love each other and they very much care for one another. And our main character is actually the older sister, who is a widow, and her younger sister has gone to this like looming dark castle to be with this man that she loves and to spend a portion of the year with him and let him court her, and she's gone with her sister to sort of like be her chaperone and make sure nothing untoward happens. But it turns out that this young man has quite an interesting father that the older sister finds herself interested in, and it's really good. I just loved this one. I loved our protagonist. She is such a fabulous central female character. She is so witty and wry and like knows herself and strong and like sarcastic, and I loved her. I thought she was fantastic. I loved that she wasn't a teenage protagonist, because as great as that is, it's nice to read about women who are like, you know, in their sort of mid to late 20s, even going into their 30s. Like, yes. So I thought she was brilliant, and I loved the developing relationship between her and the man at the head of this household. So it was great, loved it. And I also read another Beauty and the Beast retelling because I went on a weird binge during the Femme Fatale readathon, and that's Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher. This one is more of a traditional retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It doesn't veer as much as Entreat Me does from the initial story or what you're familiar with, say, from like the Disney version, and it's a lot shorter. But for all of those things, it's just as good in its own way. This book reminded me a lot of Beauty by Robin McKinley, and I actually read other people's reviews saying that it reminded them of Rose Daughter, which is Robin McKinley's other Beauty and the Beast retellings. So if you like Robin McKinley's Beauty and the Beast, then this seems to be in those veins. And what surprised me about this short novel so much is that it is equal parts creepy and funny. Like, it's genuinely laugh out loud funny. Like, the protagonist who we are following, the Beauty character, is just like a fun outlook on life, and she says just a lot of like witty things, and her banter with the Beast again is just really like endearing, and they have a lot of like fun exchanges, and I just found myself giggling a lot reading this book, and I wasn't expecting to, and it wasn't like giggling in a way that I shouldn't in the book. It felt very much like I was in on the joke with the author, and I really enjoyed that, but it was also super creepy. This castle that she moves to along with the Beast is super creepy, and there's so many mysteries going on, and it very much feels like the Beast is as much a prisoner as she is, and she's trying to figure out what is going on and what the Beast can't tell her, and there is sort of some like ever-increasing danger. And it was great. Loved it. Super short. Definitely going to read more by T. Kingfisher, because I just thought it really nailed the like tone of the whole novel, and I'm not sure how it managed to be funny and creepy at the same time, but it did, and I loved it. So yeah, those are all the books I read in the first half of March though. I am already in the middle of a few books that I will be finishing in the second half of March. Some more female driven fantasy, because why not, but also some other books including some non-fiction and some works of literary fiction. So keep an eye out for my end of month wrap up if you're interested in seeing my thoughts on those books. And I would love to hear from you if you have read or are interested in reading any of the books I've mentioned so far. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!